religion and Chinese forms of social life, and all of his monographs have received distinguished awards. So, for example, his 1988 monograph, the Ghost Festival in Medieval China, focuses on the annual celebration involving lay people and monks, analyzing both mythology and rituals. It received the American Council of Learned Society Prize for the best first book in history of religion, and was translated into Chinese. Another book of his was published in 1999. In 1994. It's called "The Scripture on the Ten Kings and the Making of Purgatory in Medieval Chinese Buddhism." This book explores the development of memorial rituals and concepts of the afterlife as reflected in manuscripts and paintings, especially those preserved among the Dunhuang corpse in northwestern China. The book received the Joseph Levinson Book Prize from the Association for Asian Studies for Pre-Modern China of the year. And his 2006 book, Reinventing the Wheel, Paintings of Rebirth in Medieval Buddhist Temples, received the Stanislas Julien Award from Institut de France. This was in 2006. And the book is concerned with Buddhist understandings of afterlife and their expression in art and ritual life. His most recent book is an anthology. It's called Readings of Lotus Sutra. This is co-edited with Jackie Stone. It was published just last year. So Professor Teiser is clearly a very prolific writer. From the 2005 to 2008, he was the director of Tibetan Site Seminar, an interdisciplinary project funded by the Henry Luce Foundation for teaching PhD students in the field of arts and history, art history, and Buddhist studies. His new research studies liturgical manuscripts from medieval China. He's interested in how visual materials and the study of manuscripts can be combined with the standard sources for the study of Chinese Buddhism. And his topic today is Buddhist Wheel of Rebirth in China and elsewhere. I present to you Professor Teiser.
Thank you very much for a very kind introduction, Professor Jiang. I send my thanks also to the Confucius Institute and the director of the Institute, Professor Tu, for their very kind invitation to speak here today. And Professor Chance has been a wonderful host as well. It's wonderful to see so many friends and colleagues from many years here at Rutgers, from many departments: East Asian Studies, History, Religion, Art, Anthropology, and so forth. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. Rather than reading a prepared lecture that would be a little wooden, what I've done today is to structure my talk around the visual evidence that I'm going to present. So I'm going to be speaking. My notes are all on the board. You'll see the same notes I do. I have an outline here of a page, but it's mostly from the materials. By training, I work in texts and history as a historian of religion, but in the past 15 years or so, I'm not a specialist. It's not a second career, but I've worked much more with art historians and especially colleagues in China, most of whom are in archaeology departments. And so you'll see some of that material today. My talk is divided into 3 parts, and it lasts about an hour, a little bit under an hour. The first part, I want to present an outline of Buddhist cosmology. In the second part, I'm going to turn to paintings of the Wheel of Rebirth that are located in Buddhist temples all across Asia. Some of them are in China, but some of them are outside of China and outside of Chinese cultural areas. Then in the third part of the lecture, since I am a China studies person by training and I'm limited to Chinese language sources primarily, I'm going to return to the question of what we learn by comparing what's in China to what's outside of China. Now I'm going to ask, why are there so few paintings of the wheel of rebirth in Buddhist temples inside China, whereas outside of Chinese cultural influence, there are relatively more paintings of the wheel of rebirth. The book Professor Jiang so kindly introduced is here. Much of the details on dating and the textual sources can be found in that book, so I'll refer you there for some of the technical details. Before turning to Buddhist cosmology, which I want to focus on, it's important to talk about Confucius. This is, after all, a Confucius Institute, and Confucianism as a philosophy and a cultural tradition predates Buddhism in China and has had and continues to have a lasting impact on all aspects of social life, including religion and philosophy. It's often said that about the Confucian worldview, that the Confucian worldview is entirely humanistic or this worldly. People often cite the first line you see up there as a justification for saying that Confucianism is not really concerned with the other world. 子不语怪力乱神. The subjects on which the master did not speak were extraordinary things, feats of strength, disorder, and spiritual beings. At the same time, however, even in the Analects attributed to Confucius, there are many explanations of the importance of things that we would associate with the afterlife and with the ritual care for people who have passed away. Prime example follows: 孟夷子问孝，子曰无为. Meng Yizi asked about filial piety or filiality, and the master said, it is not being disobedient, not going against. He continued, 生视之以礼，死葬之以礼，祭之以礼. When parents are alive, serve them according to ritual or propriety, li. When they have passed away, bury them according to ritual, and sacrifice to them according to ritual. Hence, it is not unusual to find it associated with Confucianism many practices we would consider based on a concept of the afterlife. Portraits of the ancestors are kept for many, many generations. Ancestors are represented in tablets bearing their name and position, which are enshrined ritually and receive offerings. And even into modern times, if one looks at standard Chinese funerary practice, this from a recent funeral in South China, many, many aspects of the afterlife are evident here. The ancestors in many ways continue to exist. Hence, in the materials I'm going to show you next, based on Buddhist concepts of the afterlife, there's already a lot of room within the Chinese worldview to accommodate further beliefs about the ancestors, further beliefs about rebirth, and further beliefs about what happens after this life. What is the Buddhist worldview? In religion classes, we're accustomed to explaining some of the key Buddhist concepts. The basic idea is of transience and impermanence. The importance of wuchang, or muzhou in Japanese, is central to Buddhist thought. This life ends, but is followed soon after by another life. That pattern continues, potentially without interruption. The whole process repeats itself. The general term for that understanding of repetition is samsara in Sanskrit, literally